an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Grace of Kings, brought to you by Kyle. This episode I'm covering chapters 23, 24, and 25, in which we meet a new lady character. Very exciting for me. And also, I get a little bit of a peek back into what's going on with the Chatelain, because I really did wonder what he thought of how everything was going. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, it's been a minute. I had my little break. I am into this book, and I'm very surprised that we're meeting another character at this point. Let me look. Let's see. We're at chapter 23, part 3. There's parts 4 and 5 to go. So we're about halfway through, it looks like. If you say that these chapters are averaging out to around the same number of pages as at the start of the book. And yeah, we have a new lady, and I just wasn't expecting to have like another POV character introduced at this point. Like, we're far in. But I'm excited about her and very interested to see what goes on there. And I have some uncomfortable sort of identifications with her. I related to her in a way that feels really silly, but it's true. So we'll get to that. But first, let us discuss chapter 23, The Fall of Dimu. The 7th month in the 4th year of the reign of Righteous Force. So, unfortunately, Huno, who you may remember as one of the two gentlemen who put their name in a fish. He was the crazy one that killed his partner. He has left a lasting impression. And by that I mean, people think the rebellion is doomed and corrupted because Huno was corrupted and crazy and paranoid. So, understandably, despite the fact that the last chapter ended with a big rebel victory and a lot of people deciding to side with the rebels after all, the town that he had been occupying, Dimu, does not care about these rebels, and in fact is still smarting from the beating that Huno gave them. And Mata Zindu is not. All right, so here's the thing. Mata doesn't have the compassion and understanding of the way men's minds work that Kuni has. But as much as I want to say that Mata should take Kuni's advice at all times, because I do think Kuni is extraordinarily good at what he does, I have to admit that when it comes to outright fealty, there are certain bold strokes that you do have to follow in order for the sound bites to be effective. So what I mean is, Kuni is the subtle man. Kuni is the behind closed doors making friends man. And Mata is really good for creating an overall mythology around himself, and also for, how to say this, he maintains the appearance of dominance and masculinity that men in this universe seem to crave and want to follow. I don't think that Mata is in the right here, but being in the right and doing the most effective thing are not always the same thing. And I'm not sure that Kuni's approach would translate super well to the types, the numbers that they're going to be commanding soon. I feel like Kuni, you have him approach groups of people, but they're about to like take over this huge city. And I kind of understand why Mata is as brutal as he is with these people. Now, the thing is that these people have been through what they just went through with Huno. And that's the part that I wish Mata really understood and seemed to like appreciate, because I would feel a lot differently if these people had not already supported rebels and tried their best. But they have, and Mata does not seem to appreciate or understand how exhausting that can be, and like how many people probably died already. So that all of this to say that I am Team Kuni, but Mata has his place, and as much as I want compassion to be the order of the day, and as much as I think having people on your side due to compassion is a better long-term strategy, I think thinking short-term when it comes to war is valid at times. So I just really, I'm on the fence in general with how Mata handles things. I think he should have listened to Kuni this one time, really. Maybe execute some people, but not as many as he said. I feel like straddling that line would be good. Showing some mercy, but still punishing, probably would have been the way to go, rather than letting everybody off the hook. Because I think Mata's right in the end about a threat being a promise, and if you don't follow through, what's the point? I think he's right, unfortunately, and, you know, you can't continue to make threats and not follow through at all. So it depends on how many threats they feel they've made and not followed through on already. And Kuni did get his way when it came to some of the folks in the last chapters. So Mata was due, and I'm sure he feels that. But anyway, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So the threat was unwise, Kuni said. It's understandable that the people of Dimu would be leery of joining the rebellion again after what Krima put them through. Brother, Mata said, Dimu has always been a Kukru city. That these men would now side with the Empire against us, liberators from their motherland, shows that they have been corrupted by the occupation. Traitors must be purified with their own blood. Kuni sighed. It was difficult to argue with Mata when he got into these moods, where he launched into pretty speeches full of abstractions. Mata could be proud and unrelenting in his hatred. Sometimes he saw the world in terrifying, bloody clarity. So, better to not make threat in the first place. I agree with Kuni on that. But once you make it, you kind of do have to do something. So what they decide to do, because there are these huge walls around Dimu, they decide that they are going to mine underneath the walls until they collapse, which it turns out works. And we get another little snapshot of Defiro and Ratho. Now, I find that their ongoing asides fascinating, because they're pretty much the only like commoners that we get a POV from. And where Defiro is seems like to be a sort of a reflection of where the common man is. And Ratho is where the youngest, most idyllic common man is. The man who's the most idealistic, not idyllic, idealistic. So Ratho is working hard, and Defiro is feeling some pain in his back from mining, and stops and says that he's going to take a break and asks his brother to come sit with him. And Ratho just like keeps on working. And Defiro says, dude, you're working really hard. Krima isn't our boss anymore, and Guru isn't going to whip us if we take a break. I'm not resting until General Zindu rests. Defiro shaded his eyes and gazed at the wall of Dimu. He could see Mata Zindu's tall figure at the head of a ladder crew, rushing at the wall, holding up a giant pavice? I don't know what that word is, to protect the men behind him from the arrows raining down from the ramparts. Zindu had been at it all morning and all afternoon, not taking a single break through 2 shifts of soldiers. Doesn't that man ever get tired? Defiro wondered aloud. General Zindu is like a hero from the old stories come to life. These days with you, it's always General Zindu this and General Zindu that. Maybe you should make him your older brother. He's a noble like the rest of them. Have you forgotten what it was like when Krima became king? General Zindu is nothing like Huno Krima. He leads by example, and I would rather die than disappoint him. I'm going to keep on mining until the walls fall, or he tells me to stop. We've got to take Dimu before the armada gets here. And this motivates Defiro, and he gets up and goes back to digging. So yeah, it's an interesting thing of somebody who's just tempted to give up, and somebody who really believes motivating them to keep going. And I wonder how much that applies to the rest of the population, Also, I do think being I'm not going to take a breast until Zindu takes the rest. I feel like that is a bad strategy when Zindu's obviously superhuman. He's 2 feet taller than the average man and has 4 pupils and is 4 feet across at the shoulders. This is not a normal human. Maybe your stamina is not quite up to his stamina, but it's aspirational. On the 10th day, the mine succeeded in collapsing Dimu's city walls. The rebels showed no mercy as they poured into the city like a flood and overwhelmed the remnants of the Imperial army. Naman and a few hundred of his most loyal men fought like trapped wolves all night and managed to make their way to the docks, where they were picked up by an Imperial transport and brought to safety in Dumushi. Out of the 10,000 Imperial soldiers Naman had brought with him across the Liaru, only 300 made the crossing back with him. I'm not a professional, but those numbers don't seem good to me. Good God. 300 out of 10,000. That's rough, man. The fact that Naman himself managed to survive is pretty fucking impressive, old man. Here's hoping he's allowed to fucking retire now. Mata carries out his threat. Being compassionate to one's enemies means being cruel to one's own soldiers. I see what he's trying to say there, but I don't think that's necessarily true. Your enemies and your soldiers' enemies are not necessarily the same, as much as you want to believe that my enemies are their enemies. Well, maybe on the battlefield, but these communities are knit enough that I wouldn't be surprised if they know some of these people. Denounced them as Imperial sympathizers and made them dig their own grave. 1,000 citizens. 1,000 prominent citizens made them dig their own graves. And then the Kakru soldiers pushed and shoved the crying men and women into the mass grave and buried them alive. Good God. Mata, calm down. 1,000. Does it need to be that many? 50. Guys, you're still making a fucking point. 50 people is plenty. 1,000? Good God. You do not ever want to have General Zindu against your side, Ratho said. He and Defiro plugged their ears, but the screams of the dying men and women could not be blocked out. Yikes. I mean, he's making a point, I guess. My dearest husband, please excuse the brevity of this letter. I'm still very tired, and our little boy is taking up all my time. There, that was the big news. You're a father now. It's been 100 days since his birth, and he's healthy as can be. I'm calling him Tototika for now, until he reaches the age of reason, and we decide on a formal name. I really want to know what the age of reason is. Her letter is just so adorable. You must promise not to take any unnecessary risks. Come back safely to me and our Tototika. Your loving wife, Gia. So this is some good news. And Kuni is very glad to hear it. After Mata's rage was spent, Kuni had quickly re-established order in Dimu and ordered their troops to prevent acts of looting. It was going to be a while before the city would recover, but at least the citizens were no longer utterly terrified of the liberating force. Beyond the ships, they could see the brightly colored buildings of Dimushi across the Liru's mouth, and they imagined going still farther, past Dimushi, past the rich farmlands of the Karo Peninsula, until they arrived at the roiling waves of the Amu Strait, beyond which lay Aruluji Island, with its floating cities and suspended palaces, its imposing docks and graceful ships, its elegant customs and haughty manners immortalized in 10,000 poems and 100,000 brush paintings. Which is where we go next. I'm sorry I keep having to clear my throat. Forgive me, everybody. I'm still congested from being sick, and I'm mostly over it, but this is my 4th episode of the day, so it starts to catch up. So, Aruluji, whose name means beautiful in classical Ano, is basically, it's what I think of as like where the elves live in Lord of the Rings, is what it sounds like. It's so ethereal and beautiful. Orchids everywhere, lots of white flowers, hummingbirds, ethereal moths at night. The city was that's like the capital is Muning, built on a series of tiny islands in shallow Lake Toyedmotika, Lake Tututika's baby sister. The city resembled a diadem floating over the water. The delicate spires of its temples and the graceful thin towers of the palace were connected by a network of narrow arching bridges that defied gravity. The houses and towers of Muning were built to make the most of the limited space on the islands. Narrow, tall, and built from flexible walls, they swayed and flexed with the wind like bamboos in a grove. Having run out of space on land, some houses had to be built like water striders hovering above the lake, supported by long pylons sunk into the lake bed. Floating gardens drifted around the islands of Muning provided its inhabitants with fresh fruits and vegetables. Platforms made of ropes and sweet sandalwood planks hung between the buildings on which the lords and ladies of Aruluji danced at night in silk slippers and sipped tea as they admired the moon slowly rising over the sea and the port of Muningtozu on the seashore just a few miles to the east of the lake. But the jewel of Muning was undoubtedly Princess Kikomi. So, Kikomi is super hot and very, very smart. But because of the way patriarchy works, her grand uncle is right. Yes, her grand uncle is the one who inherits the throne, and everybody's sort of like, yeah, it's too bad she wasn't a boy, because damn, she'd be like really good at this job. But vagina, so whatever. And we go to her room as she's getting ready because her granduncle is about to send out a bunch of ships to fight against the incoming armada of airships that Zana is sending at them. And she is meant to be a representation of the goddess of Amu and be inspiring to the troops and stand next to him looking amazing. She had sprinkled gold dust in her light brown hair to give it the appearance of being blonde, and she had brushed blue powder around her eyelids to highlight her blue eyes. Tonight she would be a symbol, and she understood that whatever else symbols did, they did not sigh and complain about their fate. And then she thinks about how, as long as she could remember, she had been told incessantly that she was beautiful. It wasn't that her adoptive parents, a couple loyal to her poor executed grandfather who had raised her as one of their own, didn't praise her cleverness when she learned to read and write before all the other children, or that they didn't think it noteworthy that she could jump higher and run faster and lift more weights than her adopted brothers and sisters. Rather, it was that everyone seemed to treat these other accomplishments as mere ornaments on the crown that was her physical beauty. And as she grew older, that crown had grown heavier. She was no longer allowed to spend her summer days running wild. Instead, she was told how the sun could damage her flawless skin, how running barefoot would lead to unsightly calluses on the bottoms of her feet, how diving into the lake could risk her getting a permanent scar from the jagged rocks hidden underwater. The only summer activity permitted to her was dancing, in sedate, calm studios where the sunlight was filtered through silk screens and the floor was lined with soft-woven grass mats. So then she's taught not how to think for herself, not traveling and studying with different masters of mathematics and rhetoric and composition, but instead figuring out how to dress properly, to flatter different parts of her body, how to apply makeup, how to wear her hair, how to hold herself, how to talk, how to inspire. It is really so true. And I really want to know who Ken Liu talked to that he got this so fucking right. It was a cliche for a beautiful woman to complain about being cursed with beauty, Kikomi knew. But just because it was a cliche didn't mean it wasn't true either. And all right, here's where I relate to this. And this is something that I have really started to understand a lot better with retrospect. When I was still in school, high school, college, I was unusually beautiful. And, you know, I've gotten older. I've gained a lot of weight. I'm still fine. I'm still pretty, but it's not like it was. You know what I mean? And I remember, and I didn't understand what it was at the time. I remember going to bars and clubs and guys coming up to talk to me and their reaction when I had something to say. They would come at me with really bad lines or offering to buy me drinks or being like shady in the way they worded something, thinking that I like wasn't going to notice. And I would call them out or resist what they were trying to push on me or whatever. And there was always this like look in their eye that I didn't understand at the time of real surprise. And I really kind of was like, did they just think like, what were they expecting me to do, to just take this? And now I realize that what it was they didn't think that I was smart. They saw me as this really pretty girl who was young and, you know, naive in a lot of ways. And they came at me with their bullshit. And don't get me wrong, I didn't always see through it, but I did more than some. And the fact that I could hold a conversation or debate them in any way was like constantly a surprise. And when I say it like this, it's sort of, it reads like, oh, they underestimated me because I was so pretty. But it's not even underestimation. It's that it doesn't matter. That's the part that upset me, was they didn't give a shit what I had to say. They didn't care if I could have a conversation. That was not why they were talking to me. And so there were times where you could see the moment where they decided I was just more trouble than I was worth, because I wasn't going to just be pliable and agreeable. And it's not like, oh, I'm so underestimated in my own time. It's not underestimation. It's that whether you're smart or not is irrelevant. When you are a certain level of attractiveness, you can just be as dull as powder and people don't care because you are so beautiful to look at that they'll just give you a pass. And I didn't understand how much weight was put on how I looked, not only in conversations like that, but in school. I could see teachers constantly being like surprised if I gave a shit and tried. Or I would see the thing that, like, honestly got to me, and it's what is said here, is how no matter what you accomplish, it comes down to how you look. It's so true still. Like, think of the women out there who are fucking geniuses, who are brilliant, who have created things, and the first thing people talk about and comment on is how they look. That is not the case with men. That's not how it works. It's certainly something that will be discussed eventually once we've exhausted their accomplishments. But how a woman looks is first and foremost on everyone's mind as to, and this is something that, like, as a person who has created her own podcast network, I think about constantly, is how much more successful my network might be if I looked now the way that I looked then, because I could have a brand that was like built around me being hot. And that is a thing that plenty of women do very successfully. And I do not fucking fault them for that at all, because this is the world that we live in, and you got to capitalize on what you have. So I'm not mad at these women for doing this at all. This is, you just got to do what you got to do. But this whole thing about your accomplishments coming second, if they come into people's consideration of you in the first place, is so true. And realizing, like, as I gained weight and as I got older, I saw the change in how I was treated by people and how much more I had to fight to be taken seriously in a different way. When I was young and beautiful, I was not taken seriously because I was young and beautiful, and people were like, oh, but you're pretty, so it doesn't really matter. Oh, but you are smart. Well, I guess that's nice. Nice to have that on top of it, I guess. Then it becomes, oh, God, who cares? Oh, I guess she does have some good ideas. Well, at least she's good for something. That's where the change happens. Whether you're attractive or not, your looks are still the thing forever. And this is why when you pass a certain age, you become essentially invisible to the world as a woman. Past the age of 45, 50, past menopause, when your lips begin to thin, your hourglass figure begins to thicken, and you are no longer considered fuckable, that's your expiration date. And fuckability is your value scale. And how many men want to fuck you determines how worthwhile you are as a commodity. And if you are beautiful, you have a huge advantage, of course. But because women are so undervalued in every other area, having other skills, it doesn't factor in. And it's so fucking frustrating. It's so frustrating. So this whole thing, as much as someone could read her section and really roll their eyes, I didn't at all. I felt it in my bones because she has all of these aspirations and people just are like, yeah, but you're really pretty. So why don't you just, and this, I mean, there's literally a story circling now and it's touted as this really powerful thing. And it is in a way. It's about and I'm trying to remember her name and I can't. But it's this girl from Ghana, I think, who was in college, and somebody took a photo of her that started to get circulated. And she's a black woman with very dark skin, which is not something that is celebrated in a lot of like circles and fashion and whatever. Like white supremacy is real, y'all. And she wound up getting a deal with Vogue and being on the cover and dropped out of college where she was studying biochemistry, because she would make more money modeling. Now, it's certainly a victory for black women, especially dark-skinned black women, who feel like their beauty is not valued because it's too dark and therefore unattractive. I totally get that, and that is valid. But also, this girl was going to be a biochemist. And now she's a model because that's valued so much more. And it's so fucking depressing, honestly. So, I mean, you know, I guess she could go back to school when her modeling days are done, but like, it's just, it is the kind of thing where you have to like put all of the weight of your worth on your looks while you can, and then you get to pursue other things that you care about once that is no longer like a commodity. Just gets me really upset. So then comes a wonderful fucking conversation that I love so much, where somebody shows up in her room, this woman whom she does not recognize or know. And this woman obviously is a god, right? And she says, you wish you would be valued for what you can say and think and do. And you think if you were plain, it would be easier. And Kikomi says, when I was younger, I would get into debates with my brothers and their friends. They could seldom win, for their minds were dull, and they did not apply themselves to their work. But often, when it was clear that I had the better argument, they would laugh and say, it's impossible to argue with such a pretty girl, and thereby deny me my victory. Yo, again. Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is exactly how it fucking happens, guys. Yes. The gods give us different talents and different endowments, said the woman. Do you think it profits the peacock to complain that he is hunted for his feathers, or the horned toad that she is valued only for her poison? And then continues, you think your beauty traps you, but if you're truly as strong and brave and intelligent as you think you are, you'll understand how dangerous and powerful your beauty can be if you wield it properly. Then she talks about a couple of different wars, you know, the mythical wars in which goddesses who are beautiful are able to slay men because they get them to let their guard down by pretending to have sex with them or actually having sex with them. And she counters that with, must a beautiful woman always be a seducer, a harlot, a mere bauble put on display as a distraction? Is that the only path open to me? Which, valid, you know? But this woman replies with, those are the labels men have put on women. You speak as though you despise them, yet you're merely parroting the words and judgments of historians who should never be trusted. Consider the hero, Iluthan, who stole into the bed of the Queen of Ekofi, who played with the hearts of Rapa and Kana, who showed his naked body to the gathered princes and princesses of Crescent Island, claiming himself to take equal delight in men and women. Do you think the historians call him a seducer, a harlot, a mere bauble? A seducer is one who wins through deception rather than force. A harlot is one who wields sex like a sorcerer wields a staff, and a mere bauble may yet decide to put herself on display, to guide the hearts and minds of thousands into an unstoppable force. Yo, she's not wrong. So I really loved this conversation because it is one of those things, like, especially when you're dealing with fiction, a beautiful woman who seduces men and whispers in their ear, meh, meh, meh. Like, it really does get frustrating and old. At the same time, there is validity to women working with the tools that they have been given within the society in which they were raised, and that's a valid thing. And that's part of why I get mad when Sansa Stark gets a lot of shit for being so passive, because guess what? She is functioning according to the society in which she lives. We can't all be Aryas, you know? We can't all be fucking knights. That's just not how it works. And this is part of why women getting like the reputation for being passive aggressive and deceptive and manipulative. Yeah, because outright aggression was discouraged among women. We adapted and managed to learn to wield power in a way that was allowed. So she's figuring this out. And we find out that the attacking airships, these poor dudes on the sea were not ready. They thought they were ready. And they were watching the way that the airships came at them in this tight formation and thought that this doesn't seem right. They're like setting themselves up to get all shot down with one blow practically. What are they doing? And the ships that are on the sea, by the way, are being rowed. Well, guess what? It turns out that while the airships distracted them by dropping bombs on them and making it seem like that was their main deal, that what they were actually doing was dropping off some little boats, and those guys were coming up to the sides of the big ships and tangling up their oars so that they could not move, and basically harnessing them in place to be attacked. They're brought down quickly. Marana is not bad at his job. Kikomi from the shore can tell that things have not gone well. Her granduncle is stripped naked and put into a cage where he's going to be taken to the city and paraded naked through the streets. Meanwhile, Kikomi has decided that she's going to try and manage Marana. Now, she overplays her hand. She comes so close. So close. Marana closed his eyes and savored her voice. He could fall asleep to it and dream beautiful dreams. It was like the orchid. Orchid-flavored tea of Amu, sweet, lingering, ever refreshing. He wanted to listen to her forever. She came up to him and placed her arms around his neck. He did not resist. So she sleeps with him, and then tries to convince him that he should turn on Irishi. She thinks she's being subtle, but she is not. This moment is really something. He looked at the mirror and Kikomi's reflection. Her eyes gazed back, poised between boldness and submission, lively, ambitious, seductive. But can we not make the world fairer, more just? She asked. Again, her voice seemed to wrap itself around him, to lead him to places he had dared not visit. He looked at the small stand next to the bed upon which his tunic lay, neatly folded. He had taken the time to do this before embracing her last night. A few coins were scattered on the stand as well. He reached out to stack them in a neat column. He disliked order. The coins struck one another and made a familiar sound. In a distant corner of his mind, he heard the sound of clarity, of meticulous accounting, of neatly sorted ledgers where each entry made sense. He shivered, and the spell she wove faded. With great reluctance, he turned back to her. That's enough. He took a deep breath. She'd almost had him. I had thought you ambitious, Marana said, but I was wrong. She turned to look at him and her face fell as she realized that she had failed. You're not just ambitious. You love this land and her people. You crave their approval. And when she says, well, you said you would make me Duchess, he says, that was before I understood how dangerous it would be to leave you in charge of Amu. I have to admit here, guys, I low-key, stand for Marana. He's a brutal man, yes. But the fact that he managed to see through this is pretty fucking impressive, man. Because as, again, a girl who used to have this kind of power over men, it's astonishing what complete, pieces of clay dudes turn into. You can convince them to throw themselves out a window if you're hot enough, and they're fine with it. They're, oh yeah, that's whatever you want, sweetie. It's amazing how much power there is. And of course, I did not know that until it was gone. Come back. But the fact that he manages to keep his, like, the presence of mind and not only sees that she's trying to manipulate him, but also sees her ability and value. That's not a small thing. So I low-key admire him for that. Got to admit. But it doesn't go so well for her because he basically tells her that you are going to let's see, where is it? If you will leave Aurulugi as it is, if I will make you a proposal, if you agree, I will leave Aurulugi as it is. Life here will go on much as it was before. You will be remembered in song and story as the protectress of your people. But if you refuse, I will have you brought to the lowliest brothel of Pan, where I will sell you for a single piece of copper. You will always be remembered as a whore. I will also order Lake Toyemotika drained and Muning burned to the ground. I will spread salt in the fields and order 1 in 10 inhabitants of Aurulugi executed. I have already killed so many men that a few more will not matter. But most of all, I will let it be known that you alone, were responsible for the fate of Aurulugi. You had the chance to save your people, and you said no. So she allows herself to be taken prisoner, naked and put in a cage along with her grandfather. But Kano Tho, as it turns out, the captain of the palace guards, manages to take control of the airship that they are in, escapes from being tied up and saves everybody. And it turns out that her granduncle is not up to the task of rallying troops when he is not sitting on a throne in a palace. So everybody's like, well, what do we do now? And she says, we're going to go to Karusa and talk to King Thufi. And everybody says, yes, ma'am. And that's where they go. I'm very interested to see what she manages to do. I can't wait. I low-key, want her to be the ruler of Zana. You know, it's been on my mind that it would be Mata and Kuni together. But, nah, they can, lay the groundwork and then she can actually be the queen. That would be cool. The empress. Or everybody is independent again. I don't know. But whatever it is, I want her to be super important and powerful and rad. I'm looking forward to it. Celeste, chapter 25. It is a horse. Pan, the 8th month in the 4th year of the reign of righteous force. Chatelain Pyrrha was concerned. My delight at finding out that we were in a Chatelain Pyrrha chapter. Because I have been wondering, what does he make of this? He has been wanting everything to go wrong. And Morana has been amazing at his job. And he's been killing it. Now, not everything's been going well for everybody in Zana, but nevertheless. But it turns out Chatelain Pyrrha has changed his objective a little bit. He would have been content once merely to see Zana fall, but now he wanted more. He had suffered the idiots Erishi and Krupo long enough. He, not Krupo, should be the one to seize the throne from the house of Zana. Maing must be properly avenged. Oh, Pyrrha, you dumb. Listen, just let Zana crumble. You don't need to be king. You're an idiot. I hate you. He's not an idiot. That's what's so frustrating. Pyrrha is not an idiot. But I do hate him. I hate him. He let this bitch that he claimed to love be raped and murdered in front of him, right? And his kid killed. Because he didn't have the balls to say anything. Because I would just die too. Yeah, you would. Do it. You shit. And now he's doing all this torturing and murdering and acting like it's all in the name of Maing. Like she would want that. Get out of here. She's too busy being dead, you jerk. So what he decides is that Krupo is getting too big for his britches, that everybody, because Krupo's taking all kinds of credit for assigning Marana to be the military marshal. And everybody is giving him that credit and treating him like he's a very important man. And he being Pyrrha feels like it's only a matter of time before Krupo realizes that he is the brains behind the operation and decides that he is going to take power for himself, which, frankly, seems true. We do get inside Krupo's head a little bit later, and that seems like it's just inevitable. So he goes to see the prince, and Pyrrha keeps him from seeing the boy, and then tricks him into rushing to see the prince later when he's in the middle of making out with this girl. She's like half naked. I'm not sure if he was actually in the middle of having sex or not, but there was something. And the boy is totally humiliated to have been discovered this way. And so Pyrrha has managed to marry the thought of Krupo with the feeling of humiliation in Erishi's mind, which is pretty smart. Then Pyrrha bribes Krupo's butler to save all of the scrolls, the scraps that Krupo practices calligraphy on, and give them to him because I just admire his art and I want to save some of the beauty that he treats like trash. Well, it turns out he can take apart, because what he does, he took them and carefully rubbed a hot kettle against their backs until the wax logograms were soft enough to be pried off. Then he selected and arranged the logograms he needed on a new scroll and heated the scroll from the back until the logograms melted just enough to adhere to their new location. So, I'm confused about how these work because apparently the logograms are made of wax, but there's talk about ink later, and he had in possession a new poem in Krupo's beautifully sculpted flowing script. That's how it's described. So I'm not exactly sure what this looks like. I'm going to Google logogram to see if there's, because I was just assuming that it was like a combo letter symbol, which a sign or character representing a word or phrase, such as those used in shorthand in some writing systems. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm not getting a good mental image of how this is like script and also wax, that there's ink involved, and yet he can like peel pieces off and put I just don't exactly know how that works. He left it carelessly on the steps leading up to the grand audience hall where it would be discovered and brought to the emperor. I am the eagle who must carry a mouse. I am the wolf who must obey a vole. But one day I will assume my rightful place, and then the foolish child will beg me for his life. So Krupo gets thrown in prison. And this is the part he would save himself by his brush and ink, his knife and stick of wax. I don't know. I want to know how this works. But anyway, Pyrrha tortures Krupo. They break his fingers in 1,000,000 pieces. He has to sign his confession by holding the brush in his teeth because, as it's written, his fingers were now soft as melted wax, which is the worst thing I've ever heard. Then somebody comes and asks him if he's been tortured and whether his confession is even true. And he says he has been tortured and that his confession is not true. He tried to speak, but could not. Pyrrha's men had burned his tongue with hot pokers. He held up his hands to show the guards what he had been put through. The confession, it wasn't true, was it? He shook his head. I had some of my men dress up as palace guards to test you, Chatelain Pyrrha said. They found out that you weren't sincere in your confession. You still seem to be laboring under the impression that you're looking at a deer instead of a horse. And I'm telling you, it is a horse. Do you understand? Pyrrha's men tortured him all night. Pyrrha had the best doctors come care for Krupo. They bandaged his hands and salved his tongue. They fed him healing soup and applied herbal paste to his bruises. But Krupo shrank at their touch, terrified that it was but a trick from Pyrrha to hurt him more. Yeah, he's basically doing the Reek and Ramsay thing here. The confession, it wasn't true, was it? Krupo nodded vigorously. He mumbled and croaked and tried to indicate with every gesture that it was all true, every single word. He was a traitor. He wanted the Emperor dead. He was very sorry, but he deserved what he got. He hoped that his performance this time would pass muster. So, Irishi decides to cut out his heart. Emperor Irishi ordered Krupo's heart cut out of his chest and brought to him so he could see whether it was red with loyalty or black with betrayal. But when the heart was brought to him, the boy lost his courage. He ordered it fed to his dogs without looking. Yeah, you suck, Irishi. I have to admit, because there's a part here where Pyrrha says someday he would enjoy watching the boy emperor beg him for his life. And there was a part of me that was like, you want this boy to beg you? Like, he wasn't the one. But then I'm like, no, he's done a bunch of shit. Fuck this kid. I hate him. So, when he was younger, maybe not. But now, yeah, no, he's awful. So Pyrrha takes it upon himself to mess with Marana's strategy. Because what he had been gonna do was basically ignore Fasa, who, because there are 3 remaining areas that need to be conquered. 3 states. Fasa, which Marana doesn't think is like of any consequence because that guy is like really weak apparently. And Gon, who is on Wolf's Paw and seems content to just forget his ancestral claims and just stay on Wolf's Paw and ignore everything that's going on. So Marana is like, all right, well, I'll combine with Naman's forces and hit Kakru, which I'm like, do you know Naman's forces are only 300 people by now? But in any case, that is not what's going to happen. Pyrrha gets in touch with him and tells him, pacify the outer islands first. The messenger read the words of Goran Pyrrha, and the big island will come to heal by itself. This seemed to Marana the wrong strategy, but he suppressed his annoyance before the imperial messenger. The emperor and the new prime minister seemed to think war a game that they played on a model of the empire in the grand audience hall. He might be the Marshal of Zana, but ultimately he was just a token to be picked up and put down wherever his superiors wished. For a moment he almost wished he had given in to the temptation of Princess Kikomi. But that opportunity was past, and the path of treason would remain for him only a thing of the imagination. He was too meticulous, too attached to beliefs about order and a man's proper place. So he sends out his orders, and Naman was to leave a small number of defenders at the Liru River at the edge of the Rima woods. He would then take another 20,000 men through Thako Pass, through gentle Gehira and its wealthy garden cities and peaceful rice paddies, and meet the Armada at the point where the Shinane Mountains ran into the coast. From there, the Empire would launch an all-out assault on Wolf's Paw. Well, that should go well. Oh my goodness. You guys, this book. So I wonder what's going to happen with Wolf, because obviously pacifying the outer cities, the outer states, outer islands, whatever, is going to give Kakru all kinds of time to like prepare and regather and regroup. So here's my question. Pyrrha is trying to fuck with Zana so that he can take power and become the emperor himself and kill Irishi and, yada, yada, yada. what does he think is going to happen with these rebels once he gets Zana weakened enough? I feel like I don't understand what his overall end game is. How is he planning to weaken Zana that much that he can just step in, but also like keep the rebels from getting powerful enough to depose him? Does he think that he can present himself to the rebels and basically be like, oh no, well, I'm on your side, really. I was working from the inside to undermine everything the whole time. Does he think they're going to buy that? And even if they did, he's still allowing millions of people, I think we can estimate now, to be killed either by this war or by encouraging Irishi's crazy plan to make a giant tomb for his dad, and so conscripting workers, and then the famine and everything. I mean, I don't know what his plan is. Kyle says stay tuned for Friday. It's going to be a wild one. Oh boy. So Kyle, the Friday one is at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I will be doing chapters 26 through 28. So just to let you all know, Friday the 18th, which probably will be past by the time this episode is posted. But, yeah, I am just so curious about what the fuck, because I don't feel like he's thinking this through completely. He just has this vague sort of abstract notion that he can weaken and then take his place, but there's still a war happening that you have to win. Or you become a rebel, in which case the power that you've taken on is nothing because everybody wants to be independent again, right? I don't know. I'm wondering if Ken Liu borrowed from actual history in writing this story, because I know that George R.R. Martin, for example, borrowed from the War of the Roses for his beginnings of the Starks and Lannisters. Kyle says he did. Well, don't tell me, because I will look it up to get information, and it will spoil me somehow, and it'll give me ideas. So don't tell me until after, because that's what I like. I love me some history, as much as it can get incredibly convoluted and difficult to follow. And this, I ask that because this feels like something somebody would do. This book more so than the next one. Yeah, I feel like that tends to happen, right? People take historical events to base something on, and then they just sort of, extrapolate from there. But yeah, I'm just like, Pyrrha, and he's so myopic and so fucking self-pitying, to be honest, with his Maing must be avenged. You know what? How many people out there are dying in similarly horrific ways because of your orders, but Maing must be avenged? Get the fuck out of here. You get over yourself, you piece of shit. Everybody in this, except for fucking Kuni, Jesus. But man, I don't know how long the time span in this is either, because Kuni just had a boy, but for all I know, we're going to open up in 3 chapters and it's going to jump ahead 10 years and Kuni's son is going to be fucking fighting or something. I'm just very curious to where this is all going. And also this new princess, Kokomi, is that her name? I am very excited to have another female POV character. So yeah, this should be fun. All right, everybody. Well, Kyle, thank you again very much for this commission. Thank you to all of you for listening. I hope you've been enjoying. And I will be seeing you on Friday with another live show if you're interested in coming. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.